$700 million. That's a lot of money. To put it in perspective, the Miami Marlins, a whole MLB franchise, was valued at just over $1 billion in 2023, which is the lowest out of all 30 teams. The Dodgers will be paying 70% of that value for just one player on a 10-year contract. In case you've been living under a rock for the past week, Shohei Ohtani signed a huge 10-year, $700 million contract with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Now, this wasn't just MLB news, this was a massive story in North American sports and a massive story just in general. It went far beyond the boundaries of baseball fans, and somehow even Robert from Shark Tank got involved when he was flying in his private jet to Toronto, and John Morosi reported that it was Shohei going to sign with the Blue Jays, but then it's like, no, that's not Shohei, that's Robert from Shark Tank. And Morosi was wrong, and it was all for nothing. Ohtani, of course, ended up returning to Los Angeles, just not with the Angels, but he signed with the Dodgers. In the heart of all this chaos, this contract wielded a sledgehammer upon the already splintering foundation of Major League Baseball. It's no secret that Major League Baseball has been going downhill for a while now, and it has its problems. These problems have been hiding in the shadows, getting neglected by MLB officials, and there's been no real change made. Yet, this contract emerges as a blinding flare, exposing the said problems with an unforgiving brilliance. And now, it's just a matter of if Major League Baseball will do anything to address them. Shohei Ohtani has broken baseball. Now, the first thing we have to do to get an idea of what is going on is to take a look at Shohei Ohtani and this contract. It's 10 years, $700 million. To put that into perspective, just how large this contract is, the second highest AAV, or average annual value, in Major League Baseball is Max Scherzer at $43.3 million. There is a gap of $26.7 million between those two, which really shows just how big this contract is. Shohei's AAV is $70 million, and last year the Oakland A's entire payroll was $62 million. There have been mixed reviews by fans whether or not this contract is going to be worth it for the Dodgers. There actually has been surprisingly a lot of people saying that this contract is too much for just one player. I mean, if you look at his production on the baseball field, they would probably be right. Yes, Ohtani is easily the best player in the league, but he's not $700 million good. We don't know how long he's going to sustain this level of play, if he ever can return to being an elite pitcher after his second arm surgery, but that is not all Shohei brings to the table. He will add 50 million fans essentially overnight. The Ohtani Dodgers jersey will easily be the best-selling jersey this season, and it probably will be for a while. He brings in a lot of money, which means he's going to get paid a lot of money. The contract is $700 million over 10 years, but Shohei won't be getting paid $70 million every year. He actually will be getting paid just $2 million per year for the next 10 years. This is called deferring money, taking money down the road after the contract is over instead of during the contract. This will allow the Dodgers to spend more money on other players while Shohei is on the team. You might be thinking, is this normal? No. Deferring money has been done before, but not to this extent. This is how the contract breaks down ultimately. You got $2 million a year for the first 10 years and then $68 million a year for the next 10. Why would the Dodgers defer this much money though? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later. For now, it's time to talk about what everybody's been talking about, and that is the gap. This gap that I'm talking about is, of course, the gap between the rich and the poor. It's been a complaint for a while now from fans of small market teams that it isn't fair that the big teams can go out and spend millions and millions of dollars while they get stuck with a fraction of their payroll. Let's take a look at the 2023 payrolls in Major League Baseball. At the top, you have the big dogs all over $200 million, with the Mets leading the way with a whopping $343.6 million. Following them are the Yankees, Padres, Rangers, Phillies, Dodgers, Astros. You get the point. These are the teams that have a lot of the star players, they have the big markets, they have a lot of fans, and they have a lot of money. These teams, of course, are at the top end of the gap. At the bottom end, we have the small markets, the Pirates, the Athletics, and the Orioles. These guys are often grouped down here not only because they are small market, but they also don't have the most willing to spend owners. The Pirates owner Bob Nutting and the A's owner John Fisher don't exactly have the perfect reputation when it comes to spending. Pirates and A's fans are no stranger to star players being traded away for young talent to avoid having to pay those star players big contracts, and they try to get something else in return by trading them away. Now, it's not impossible to win this way, as we've seen the Rays and Orioles most recently do it, but it makes things a whole lot harder. All of the stars have to align at the right time in order to have a successful season. We have seen this with the Orioles in the 2023 season. All this young talent that they have collected over the past 6 years of losing seasons has culminated into one successful team. but the ownership doesn't like to cough up the money that they're going to need to pay these guys once they hit free agency. This means that most likely this success won't last too long. Ohtani was a free agent, meaning that any team was free to sign him, but in reality, it wasn't any team. There were really at most 12 teams that could afford a player like Shohei, and out of those 12 teams, half of them already have too much money tied up long term and would rather sit out on the negotiation. The rich get richer, and the poor get poorer. This is the gap. It's a pretty well-known problem in the league right now, and the Ohtani signing just highlights it even more. When we look at other leagues' payrolls, it's not anywhere close to what it is in Major League Baseball. Looking at the NBA, the slope is a little more shallow, although there still is a gap between the highest and lowest payrolls in the league. The NFL is about as close you're going to get to being a flat line. There's almost no difference between the top and the bottom team is the San Francisco 49ers, and they are doing just fine with what they have. To really visualize this gap, we can take a look at this that shows the highest payroll versus the lowest payroll in each league. The highest MLB payroll, the Mets, is towering over all the other ones, and the lowest MLB payroll, the A's, is half of the next largest on the graph. This just shows how big the difference truly is between the big markets and the small markets in Major League Baseball. Now, MLB does have some attempts to narrow this gap, and the big one is the luxury tax threshold, which is far from the best answer to this problem. This is a number that is decided on every year that MLB says, hey, if you go over this number, we're going to tax you a lot of money. Last year, that number was $233 million. This year, it's going to be $237 million. Each team's luxury tax figure is determined by adding up all the AAVs of each player's contract on the 40-man roster, and if you go over, you're going to be paying taxes. How much taxes? Well, if it's your first year going over, you're going to pay 20% extra on all of the overages. If it's your second consecutive season over the limit, you're going to pay 30% extra on all of the overages. If it's your third consecutive season or more over the limit, you're going to pay 50% extra on all of the overages. It's not a hard cap, you can still go over, you'll just have to deal with the consequences. And when you have a billionaire owner with an $8 billion franchise on his hands, paying a few extra $1 million isn't the end of the world. The luxury tax is the only thing that's preventing teams from spending an unlimited amount of money on their players. This limit only applies to a handful of teams, of course, as the smaller markets will never ever even come close to payrolls of this amount. The only team projected to go over this amount in 2024 as of now is the Mets. You might be thinking, how are the Dodgers not on here since they just signed one player to $70 million a year? They're not on here. In fact, they're not even close. They still have $59 million to spend till they hit the threshold. This brings us all the way back to the deferred money on Ohtani's contract. Like we said before, Ohtani's only making $2 million a year, then the Dodgers have to pay him while he's not even on the team. So why would the Dodgers do this? Well, it's to lower the amount of the contract that goes towards the luxury tax. Deferring the money means that Ohtani will only contribute roughly $46 million towards the tax, which is well below the $70 million mark it would have been. That $46 million value comes from a calculation that Major League Baseball does with the deferred money. This, of course, has been a hot topic of discussion amongst fans and analysts of Major League Baseball. You have one side saying that this is blatant manipulation of the luxury tax and it's unfair for the rest of the league. Then you have others saying that this isn't really that big of a deal since $46 million is still a lot of money. The argument that they have is that Ohtani wouldn't have gotten $700 million if it wasn't deferred. Projections before the contract was signed were around $44 million per year, making the $46 million mark right around what was expected to happen. A lot of people can get caught up on the $700 million mark and not realize that the reason that it is that high is because of the fact that the money is deferred. If it was deemed manipulation, Major League Baseball could step in and take action. There's a section in the current collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, that addresses this very problem. There are no limitations on how much money a team can defer on a player's contract. There is also another section that if the league does deem that a team is evading taxes in any way, they can step in and cancel the contract. What does all this mean? Well, it means that what the Dodgers did was perfectly legal and maybe not as huge of a deal as people thought it was, but the question is, should it be legal? It's still a pretty big deal, and this will most likely be a topic of discussion when the next CBA needs to be agreed on. With all this though, $46 million a year is still a lot of money, and the small market teams could never even sniff that value. That is more than half of some of their payrolls. So the question is, just how much of a disadvantage do these small market teams have? To visualize this, let's take all the teams from the past 7 years, excluding the shortened 2020 season, and take the payroll of the team and how many games they won. When we do this, we can see a pretty obvious upward trend, and that makes a lot of sense. The more money you spend on the players, the more games the team will win. Using this data, we can predict how much the payroll adds to the win column. And according to this data, every extra $1 million past around the $50 million mark that the team spends, they can expect roughly 0.09 wins added to that season. Now, this is a really rough estimate. This isn't a lot of data going into it, and the value of $1 million changes every year with inflation, and players continue to get more and more valuable. So take this number with a grain of salt, but another way to put it is on average, it takes teams $11 million to buy an extra win. Obviously, it can change depending on how well the money is used, but this is just an average and an estimate. So this is pretty significant, $11 million to get an extra win. Small market teams won't be able to do that, while large market teams will definitely be able to do that. The next thing I want to look at is the 100 clubs, the teams that have won 100 games and the teams that have lost 100 games in a single season. There are usually 2 or 3 of these on each side every year, and I just want to take a look here at this data to see the payrolls of these teams. There have been 21 teams that hit the 100 win mark in the past 7 seasons, and out of those 21 teams, only 2 have been able to do it with a payroll under $100 million. The average payroll amongst these teams is $177 million, which is well out of the range of the small market and passive owner teams. Looking at the other end of things, there have been 18 teams that hit the 100 loss mark in the past 7 seasons. Out of those 18, 11 of them have been teams with payrolls under $100 million. The average payroll amongst these teams was all the way down at $94 million, making it much less than the teams who won 100 games. The 2023 Rockies are the highest team on this list with a payroll of $171 million. This is painting a pretty clear picture. If you want to win games in Major League Baseball, you're going to have to spend money. The gap between the rich and the poor continues to show, but is there really anything the league can do to fix it? Well, the league did attempt to fix it, and the first thing that comes to mind is the playoff expansion. Now that 6 teams make the playoffs, your team doesn't have to win as many games to get in. This allowed the Diamondbacks to get in the playoffs in 2023, which almost got them a World Series, but of course, they fell short. This fix is more of a band-aid on the problem rather than actually addressing the root cause of it all. A fix that people have been suggesting is that there needs to be a hard cap or strengthening the penalties for the luxury cap. This, by design, would reduce the big teams' willingness to spend money, allowing the smaller budget teams to get in on more of the action. This would be closer to addressing the root problem, and in my eyes, this is probably the most realistic way that this problem can be addressed. Another more radical salary-based solution is a salary floor. This would force small market teams to spend more money on players in order to reach the floor. This probably won't happen, but I have seen a lot of people suggesting it, so I had to throw it out there. This would have a lot of unintended consequences in the economics of baseball, and this is probably far from the best solution. Something that we see small market teams do all the time is trade away their big stars before they hit free agency so they get something out of it instead of letting another team sign them. With the new CBA and Super 2, it's hard for teams to control their young players for longer. The Super 2 allows players to get to arbitration a year early, making 4 years of arbitration, and the new CBA has a lot of new rules where half a season can count as a full season for service time, and then they hit free agency a year earlier. It's complicated. You don't really have to understand it for the scope of this video. You just have to know that it's getting harder for teams to control their young players. Now, where am I going with this? Well, this could open up an opportunity for the MLB to introduce a franchise tag similar to that of the NFL. While the franchise tag in the NFL causes a lot of drama with the players, in Major League Baseball it could solve more problems than it causes. This will allow smaller markets to hold on to their star players for longer, but on the negative side, the star players will hit free agency a little later, so there is some good to this solution, but there's also a trade-off, as with every solution's going to have. What Major League Baseball has to do is look at all these solutions, look at what they're going to accomplish, and look at their trade-offs, and analyze it and see, is the trade-off really worth the solution? It's a complicated problem with a long list of possible solutions, and it will be tough for Major League Baseball to figure this out. I don't know if I trust them to figure it out based on their past history, but what are you going to do? There are many problems with every professional sports league, but the problems in Major League Baseball have been really highlighted with this Ohtani signing. It has caused a lot of arguing, a lot of discussion, and a lot of debate of whether the sport is truly fair or not. Is it dictated by money too much, or is it something that will be here for a while and we're just going to have to get used to it? We'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching. Please like the video and subscribe as well. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.